Quality of life and energy go hand in hand. People need access to secure sources of energy, but also energy that is affordable and clean. The realities of climate change are driving a necessary transition to low carbon energies, and investment is flowing into the jurisdictions that can enable these pathways. And Alberta has the expertise and resource base to become such a jurisdiction, but we have to capitalize on it. Welcome to a special series on the brief called Advancing Missions and Moonshots. I am your host, Brittany Brander, and in this series, I talk to leading experts, business leaders, innovators, and thought leaders across Alberta and Canada to explore solutions to the world's biggest challenges in energy, agriculture, and health. My guest today is Brent Lakeman, the director of the Hydrogen Initiative at Edmonton Global. Welcome to the show, Brent.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you. Look forward to being part of this.
So in this paper, you make the argument that hydrogen will be a critical part of a low-carbon future and that the global race is effectively on. And those jurisdictions who can marshal the expertise, resources, investment, and collaborations will win. And you make the argument that Alberta can be a winner in this race. But we do have some work to do. So we'll get into the details, but let's set some context first. Hydrogen is a very big idea, and we'll often use different colors to differentiate between the various types. For example, we'll talk about blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, gray hydrogen. Can you briefly give us an overview of what hydrogen is and perhaps how it fits into the overall energy transition?
Sure, be happy to. Hydrogen is one of the most available molecules in our world, in our system. So the challenge has been, what do we do with hydrogen? So right now, the hydrogen molecule is part of methane. So we have natural gas, and hydrogen is part of that. So the challenge now, though, is as countries, as industries around the world work to decarbonize, hit their net zero goals. Now hydrogen has become much more important. So we know when we use hydrogen as an energy source, it has zero emissions and zero CO2 emissions. So for some sectors of the economy, that's really important. There's some sectors that can more easily electrify. So they'll be turning to renewable electricity production over the longer term to meet some of their goals. But for some sectors, they can't necessarily do that. So we're really looking at some of those heavy industries historically have been using hydrogen as part of their processes. We have a lot of experience in Alberta. We've been doing this for well over 50 years as part of our refining, our chemical production processes. But now the opportunity is, how do we start to make more use of hydrogen, within our other sectors that will need it for their decarbonization goals? And that's the domestic side of it. And then we start to look at the export side of it. And we know the same issues are being faced by other countries around the world. And some actually don't have the options that we do have here in Canada. So hydrogen becomes even more important for some of those countries like Japan, like South Korea, where they've already put out their statements that they need hydrogen in order to make their decarbonization goals for key sectors like electricity generation, for example. So it's a huge economic opportunity. We talk about $11 trillion. Sorry, I forget about the zeros. $1 trillion opportunity globally, and Canada can very much be part of that. We have a Canadian hydrogen strategy that talks about a $100 billion opportunity for Canada, and Alberta can be a major part of that because we're already really the center point of hydrogen production, hydrogen use in Canada.
So talk to me a little bit about Alberta's specific opportunity. What unique assets and strengths and natural advantages do we have to become the best place on earth to produce this hydrogen and to export it to those countries that have made very public announcements that this is what they are looking for?
Yeah, exactly. And really, there's only very small handful of places in the world that can produce hydrogen at a low cost, at low carbon emissions, virtually net zero greenhouse gas emissions now from producing it, and with the talent and the expertise. And we're one of those areas. So particularly the Edmonton region, we've been doing this. We have some of the world leading projects. So when the world is now looking to, who can they work with to access hydrogen, arguably we're the lowest cost jurisdiction in the world, perhaps only second to Russia. And, right now that's not really even in the conversation, people looking to bring more energy from Russia. So we have this massive opportunity. The challenge, of course, is now moving it from the point of production to the markets, whether it's the domestic markets or more importantly, the export markets. And how do we all work together to create that infrastructure, that framework to make it happen, to really leverage the benefits that we have being, again, the lowest cost producer of clean hydrogen in the world. So So we can do that here, and now we really need to work with other jurisdictions, with industry, to make that happen in a timely manner, because the race is on, and certainly we're seeing other countries around the world go after these same opportunities. Australia is very active, Chile is very active, the United States, really becoming a world leader now in hydrogen as well, given some of the incentives that have been put in place by the Biden administration just over the last 6 or 7 months.
What do you see happening around the world right now that is working that Canada could adopt in its own hydrogen strategy?
Well, I would say maybe two things. In some cases, it's having some incentives in place. That's what, again, the position of the United States. A little less focus on the regulatory approach and more on an incentive-based structure. We've got some programs, some incentives in Canada, but they are nowhere really close at all yet to the United States. So that's one gap I think that's missing, is having competitive fiscal tools, incentives as well. What we see in other jurisdictions as well is maybe a little more of a coordinated effort. Really, you use the term, I think, a moonshot, or let's all work together to make this happen. And I think we're seeing that in other jurisdictions like Australia, the Middle East as well, where it's been recognized this is a huge opportunity for these energy producers to be in hydrogen, to move that product to the key markets, the same ones that we're competing with. So really a concerted effort with all governments in those jurisdictions to make this occur, and working very closely with industry. So I think maybe that's something missing as well, is how do we kind of pull together this Team Canada approach around the hydrogen opportunity?
And in Define the Decade, we recommended this idea, this organization called the Alberta Mission Agency, that would effectively facilitate a lot of that collaboration and coordination. So if that's what we need from kind of the government perspective in terms of incentives and collaboration, what do you think we need from the business perspective?
Um, I think we certainly want to make sure business is aware of what we're doing here. So what we've been trying to do is get out and talk to industry around the world to say this is a great location for your investments in hydrogen infrastructure, in hydrogen production, hydrogen use. So I think creating a little more awareness. I think one thing we're looking for as well is how do we get companies that, working somewhat together. We have to be somewhat mindful of the need for competition, but at the same time, to put key infrastructure in place, whether it's the port infrastructure, the rail infrastructure, pipeline infrastructure, longer term in particular, and how do we all come together around that? So, I think sometimes we see individualized, one-on-one projects, but now we may need to look at some further clustering or consortia involving multiple industries working together to make this happen. We've seen that in the past. We've seen that in the energy sector, companies working together in oil sands, for example. We're seeing that now with the Pathways Alliance. I think we can do more like that as well in hydrogen more generally, to really show the world that we've got companies all pulling in the same direction here, and making some shared investments potentially in enabling infrastructure.
We have lots of examples here in Alberta, like the ATCO hydrogen blending project, that really showcase the opportunity in hydrogen. Are there any other stories or examples that really showcase this landscape and this opportunity that we have in Alberta?
Yeah, definitely. I think we had lots of exciting stories. I mean, the stories I get to talk about when we go out to markets is incredible, and no other jurisdiction really has these types of stories. But we do need to get it out. I'll start on production. We've had Air Products. Air Products is the world's largest hydrogen producer, and they can pick anywhere in the world to put their projects in place. They have a few world-leading projects in certain parts of the hydrogen economy, but they've chosen Edmonton as the location for their first really world-scale net zero hydrogen production facility. That's a $1.6 billion project just for this initial phase. And they've certainly indicated they'd be interested in some longer-term commitments to this region as well, knowing some of the capabilities, the talent, the infrastructure we have in place here. So that's an incredible demonstration of what we have in this region, that Air Products chose Edmonton, this part of central Alberta, to locate. And part of that is because of the low-cost natural gas feedstock we have. Part of that is the carbon capture and storage, both the regulatory framework we have for it, as well as the pilot projects and all that infrastructure that's been put in place over the past 7 or 8 years. So that message really it still needs to get out, but that's just on the production side. And what I get really excited about is showing the rest of the world how we're using hydrogen We've got projects like Dow that are talking about, making some further investments in this region to decarbonize their chemical facilities, and that could be, their entire fleet of polyethylene or ethylene facilities,
Yeah.
can be decarbonized, or a major proportion of it, from this one facility in Edmonton. So that's a massive investment, and again, a massive testament to this region. But then we look at other sectors in rail, freight locomotive, for example, and Canadian Pacific demonstrating a hydrogen fuel cell locomotive in Calgary and in Edmonton. This is the only one in the world, is our understanding, looking at freight rail. We're seeing aviation sector, the exciting work taking place at the Edmonton International Airport to, both use hydrogen in a wide range of applications at the airport, and even start to work with companies on hydrogen aircrafts that are going to become more common in the future. You mentioned blending projects. ATCO's been committed towards that as well. So range of pilot projects, a range of initiatives. And what we want to do now is go from these early pilot projects to scaling up and really showing the world that we can scale hydrogen use as well. So we're talking about, let's move from the tens and 20s of vehicles into the next several hundred vehicles, and ultimately into the first 5,000 hydrogen vehicles we want to have in this market. So really getting this message out to the world. And again, I think what's happening in Edmonton region, in Alberta, is groundbreaking, and nobody else is doing what we're doing.
So we talked about this need for the narrative around hydrogen to go beyond our borders and to show the world the opportunity that is really here in the province, and also what we needed in terms of incentives and investments from both the government and business perspective. But I want to ask you, what do you think is standing in the way of us really advancing this work?
Yeah, I think it's getting government to start thinking the same way around scalability. I think everyone has the same goal. We're trying to achieve these targets, these net zero targets, but how do we get there? It might look a little bit different. We have a tendency in Canada sometimes to, let's kind of sprinkle our incentive money around. Every province gets something at a very equal level, or every sector, and let's start to look where we can really have some impact. And that's why things like hydrogen hubs are really important. Edmonton is the first hydrogen hub in Canada, and by far the largest and the most comprehensive across a wide range of sectors. So if you're going to scale hydrogen, let's start with these hubs where we can do that. We can create economies of scale. So that might mean, we may do a little bit less right now in other parts of Canada, because we want to focus our efforts on creating demand in Edmonton that will really support the rest of, certainly Western Canada, as we start to look at hydrogen use in Calgary, or in parts of British Columbia, parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So let's create that cluster of activity here where it can really support the rest of the country. And we need to work fairly quickly around this. Again, it's a race competitively, but it's also to achieve the targets that the government has set out. They will not be attainable unless we start to change our thinking around programs and be more strategic in where we want to make investments. So what we're doing is really trying to encourage the federal government to work across all departments where we can have a stronger impact and really accelerate this hydrogen economy, starting in Edmonton, but that will benefit all parts of Canada, certainly Western Canada, and ultimately other provinces like Ontario and Quebec and Eastern Canada as well.
So something that you've alluded to several times is this Edmonton hub. It's called the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. What is something that is coming out of this work from the hub that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I think what's the most exciting part is, we're bringing all the organizations, the municipalities together. So we've got, the municipal leadership from our region, where, the mayors from Sturgeon County, from Edmonton, from Strathcona, sitting around that table to really provide that degree of leadership and work closely with other governments to make sure we have similar levels of commitment. So I've already spoken about some of the work to leverage off of these initial pilot projects. So we want to scale that. So again, starting to talk about those next 5,000 vehicles. But part of that requires a very coordinated approach. Right now, there's a challenge. Everyone could decide to do their own thing, but we need to put that vision out, the strategic vision. And that's what the hub has been doing. It's saying, to achieve the targets, we have an opportunity to convert, about 15,000 heavy duty vehicles on the roads. And those vehicles, they don't just stay in Edmonton. They go down to Calgary, they go to Vancouver, Prince Rupert, Saskatoon, and so on. So providing that vision, and that really allows us to go out and talk to others about the scale of opportunity that we have here. So if we're trying to bring in heavy duty trucks, great, we have a couple pilot projects, but we need to talk to those major equipment manufacturers, the Hyundais of the world, or the Toyotas, or other companies that have these types of vehicles and show them that this is a market where you're going to have significant demand, and it's going to be a more rapid demand compared to other parts of the world. So attracting those companies here. And what I get most excited about is, once you do that, what else do you get from it? You get other economic opportunity. We can be part of that maintenance capability for these vehicles. We can actually get into some of the assembly potentially of these vehicles for certain niche products in particular, where we've been doing that already. We've been doing that in things like the mining sector, heavy duty equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more opportunities we can pursue. And even taking it further, you start to look at new sectors that maybe historically have been doing their production elsewhere. As they start to meet their net zero goals, they may want to locate where the hydrogen is. That's something we're going to test a little bit further in the coming months. But if traditionally you might have been locating your business elsewhere, well, now to meet your net zero goals, you can no longer do that. So it may make more sense in some cases to locate closer to the hydrogen. So we could see some significant economic industrial diversification activities taking place.
Yeah, one of the big, global trends that we're seeing right now is just the disruption of our traditional industries through technology and data and AI. And, Edmonton has one of the three largest AI hubs in Canada or North America, I believe. And, so there's a real opportunity to not just develop the hydrogen fuel here in Alberta, but also to develop the knowledge and bring that talent and those jobs and those opportunities to the province as well. So one final question for you as we finish up. What is one idea or insight that you would like someone to take away from reading this discussion paper?
Well, I think, at a high level, these opportunities don't come across our desks, every day, every year. This is really a once in a generational opportunity to really go after a significant prize. Again, we're talking about a global prize, valued in the trillions, maybe $11 trillion. We can be a major part of this. So, we have to act, we have to pursue it truly as a moonshot, as you've said, and really all hands on deck around this. It won't happen on its own. It does require, partnerships to bring everyone together around it. And I think we're beginning to do that, but more work is still required. We need to have people focused on some of the critical enabling infrastructure. We've done it in the past in other sectors. We can do it here as well. So let's kind of learn from, we've had some success historically, but we've also had some challenges over the past several years, and, trying to show the rest of the world that we can actually get product out to market. And I think sometimes the world's not necessarily focused on Canada because we have had some challenging experience. So I think we can change the narrative, and we can work together to really show the world that we are going to be one of the top producers of hydrogen, and we're going to be using it as well across a range of sectors here.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Brent, for joining me today. Well, thank you for tuning into this special episode of The Brief. You can read the paper in its entirety at definethedecade.com. And we will be releasing new episodes in this special series periodically. So make sure that you are subscribed to Alberta Better on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts, and be the first to access new episodes. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.